in, Park Church, to your Midweek Pastor's Moment and Devotional. It's good to have you. Whenever you find me in your week and you're listening to this, it's good to be together. You know, on Sunday past, if you were here and we were talking about being a welcoming church, I said, show me how you live and I'll show you who you are. And that's just when we're talking about the characteristics of your home will be reflective of your value, your priorities, and even really your personality. You'll find people that just kind of have maybe that very flamboyant, super outgoing, kind of go with the flow kind of personality. A lot of things in their house are a little just very vibrant and bold and just like their personality. So show me how you live and I'll show you who you are. And maybe you've heard similar sayings like, show me your friends and I'll show you your future. I really like that one, talking to youth, especially show me your friends and I'll show you your future. In fact, I even read this morning in 1 Corinthians, do not be deceived. Bad company corrupts good character. Just goes to show you, again, it's about influence. Those outside influences, they're reflective or become a way to infiltrate on who you are. Another quote that I'll share from you, not from any philosopher necessarily, but from Dr. Seuss. And it's from the movie The Lorax, and he says, and asks the question, which way does a tree fall? And the response is, a tree falls the way it leans. So be careful which way you lean. And not so much about influence, like the first few quotes, but it's about intention and direction. And in 1 Corinthians chapter 9, Paul is talking about, he's concluding really in a section about rights. He's talking about eating and drinking. He's talking about what's permissible. He's talking about wages, among other things. And his perspective overall is about bringing the body under submission or restriction for the sake of advancing the gospel. That there can be some good limitations in order that the gospel would be not hindered and could go forward. And so that it's better than anything that can be achieved by exercising these rights, that this idea of turning away from certain things. And so he uses a sports analogy in 1 Corinthians 9 and beginning in verse 23. He says, why would he restrict himself? Why would he limit himself to things that are good or beneficial or permissible? Because there's something greater to be achieved. I do all of this for the sake of the gospel, that I may share in its blessings. Do you not know that all run the race, but only one gets the prize? Run in such a way as to get the prize. See, not everybody who runs in this lane is going to get rewarded. Paul uses lots of sports analogies as you read through his writing. So not everybody who runs in this lane is going to get rewarded. So choose to run in a way that keeps the goal in mind. In other words, be careful how you lean. You might not be facing towards the goal. You may be involved in things or what's around you, what you choose to associate with. Those things are actually not propelling you towards the finish line. At least not towards the finish line that Paul has in mind, which is the gospel, which is the kingdom, which is, the first and greatest thing that our life should be about. In fact, you might not even then finish the race. It's not only that you're not facing the right finish line. I heard the quote that the biggest tragedy in life is to win at the wrong thing. So he's saying, like, you gotta be mindful of this. Not everybody who's in this lane who's running is going to get a reward. Verse 25, he says, everyone who competes in the games goes into strict training. They do so to get a crown that will not last, but we do it to get a crown that will last forever. And that there is some sacrifice that will occur if you're going to compete in this in this race. He talks about abstaining or doing without things that aren't necessarily bad things. They just aren't beneficial. And he's really willing to just cut away these things for the sake of getting him towards the goal. And you can't change what you're not willing to confront. So if we think about the goal, or if you think about a goal that you have, maybe it's to be a more involved parent, to be more integrated into your kids' lives. If that is your goal, then is the amount of time you're spending at work getting you towards that goal? You see, it would be easy to say, well, is the amount of time you watch TV getting you towards that goal, or the amount of time you spend on social media getting you towards that goal? But what about a good thing? How are things that maybe seem good or seem beneficial, like putting in lots of overtime, trading shifts and working on weekends, how are those things which are seemingly good getting you towards the goal of being a better parent? Or what about other good things like hobbies or even time with friends? Are you, by the choices you make, running in such a way to win the prize? So if that is your goal, if the being a better parent is a goal, or maybe you have another goal in mind, then if that is your goal, there's going to be some restrictions to your lifestyle. If you were training for a race like this, there would be some dietary restrictions to your lifestyle. There would be some social restrictions to your lifestyle, because they say the amount of rest you have is equally as important as the amount of work that you put in. You need to rest. And so there's going to be some restrictions. And when we're talking about reaching the goal that Christ has called us heavenward for, which is the language that Paul uses when he writes to the Philippian church, the results that we're talking about are not short-lived. He's saying people on earth, they understand and they run the race, and what they're going to inherit by doing that is temporary, it's fleeting. But what we are focused on, or what our calling towards and what we're working at, is for an eternal crown. It's for an eternal reward. It has implications for eternity. The choices we make today have implications for tomorrow and for all eternity. And so we go back to those words from that Dr. Seuss book, then be careful how you lean. If the choices you're making are having implications for eternity. Paul goes on to say, therefore, I do not run like someone running aimlessly. Maybe you'd have to think about the last time you saw a child run, and they just kind of run and they flail. They're running aimlessly, really for no reason. They go out jogging, just running for no reason. He says, I'm not going to just run aimlessly. I actually have to have intention in every step. I have resolve in every decision. I'm intentionally choosing what I'm not doing, because those things are not getting me towards Christ's goal. Paul says, if you read earlier in 1 Corinthians, he says, I could take a wage for preaching the gospel, but I would rather work. So there's no barrier to people hearing the message, that they think I would do it out of selfish ambition because I'm getting paid. He says, no, nobody's going to steal this from me. He says, do I have the right to take a wife? He said, of course I do. Other apostles, they took wives, but I remain single. I make a decision because this is advancing me towards a goal that Christ has for me. So he talks about all these very intentional things he's aware of, that he puts restrictions on himself for the sake of the gospel. So I don't run like someone running aimlessly. He says, I don't fight like a boxer beating the air. I'm aware of my opponent and I'm aware of my opposition. If you were getting into a race, you would be looking at the other runners that are with you. You'd be aware of your opponents. And in our life, in our spiritual walk and faith, we understand we have an opponent. We understand we have an enemy who wants to oppose us achieving the goal that Christ has called us for. He's anointed us to this task in this time. The enemy wants to sidetrack us. He wants to get us outside of our lane. He wants to downplay the implications of running with all that we have in this time. And he wants us to get a little bit distracted about things that we could enjoy along the way. And those things will rob us from the goal, will rob us from receiving the reward. We need to be familiar with the strategy that's going to get us to the end. He says in verse 27, no, I strike a blow to my body and I make it a slave, so that after I've preached to others, I myself will not be disqualified for the prize. He's saying, I want to reach the end and be able to stand and receive the commendation that is warranted for the life that I've lived. He understood that life, as we hear in Ecclesiastes, is but a vapor. It's here today and gone tomorrow. He says, I got to run with intention in everything. I'm going to throw off the sin that so easily entangles and run with perseverance a race set before me. Again, that's that race language he uses as he's writing to the church in Philippi. But here we see the same. He's saying, no, we have to make some very distinct choices. These choices have implications. Be careful how you lean. 2 Timothy 4:7 says, I fought the good fight. I finished the race. I've kept the faith. Now there is in store for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will award to me on that day. And not only me, but also those that have longed for his appearing. Also those that have run the race with the goal in mind. all of those run the race, they will receive this reward. If someone were to survey your life, show me your life, and I'll show you who you are. If they were to look at your priorities and your values, would they understand or would they see that those are reflective of the person headed towards the goal that we're headed towards? Would it show the value and the importance of making Christ known and knowing Christ intimately? Would those be what people just automatically see from the way we live our life, the things we say no to, the things we say yes to, and the way we run with intention towards the goal? And that's a question for yourself. That's a self-assessment that we should have. How would we assess our lives in that way? Knowing that we have a special and unique calling to fulfill. You have a special and unique calling at the Park Church to fulfill that God has called you here for. And we want you to be able to strive towards that and come alongside of you and then encourage you in the things that God wants to maybe strip away in order that you may run this race and receive the prize. God wants to bestow on you the prize, but right now, now is the training. Now is the preparation for the race. And you know what? It's never too late. God always is gracious and patient as we reorganize our priorities, as we change the way we lean, as we see ourselves as being maybe entangled, or as we see ourselves as being weighed down, and we're looking at ways in which we can shed off those things in order to pursue what God has called us for. And so I love Paul's words here and this analogy that he gives us, that we need to run the race in such a way as to get the prize. And church, that's what family is all about. That's what belonging in a community is all about. It's knowing that we're running together with people that have the same goal in mind. And I heard a great, again, analogy. I love those tons of turns of phrase. The person who wins the race and the person who loses a race, they have the same goal. But what distinguishes them is the disciplines that got them there, the dedication that got them there. The winner and the loser, they have the same goal. So it's not just enough to say that each one of us, we have the same goal of spending our eternity with Christ. The goal is great, but it really comes down to the dedication that we're going to put in to seek God and to know Him, knowing that we can't earn our righteousness. That's not what I'm talking about, but I'm talking about the perseverance, the dedication to the Lord's commands and to fulfilling the Great Commission that He's called us to in this time. So we're doing it together. You have support, and we love you, and we just want you to know that. A couple things before I let you go for the evening. Hopefully you were here on Sunday, and if not, I encourage you to, again, take a look around the church foyer in the next number of weeks and look at the great renderings we have of our future sign project. And you'll hear more about it as we talk about being prepared on the Thanksgiving weekend to take up an offering to cover the cost of our sign, just over $170,000. And not forgetting that we have a matching donation of 1-to-1. So every dollar that you commit to the sign project will be matched right up to $100,000. So I know we can do it, and so I encourage you to pray about how you can be involved in the future of the Park Church here and our profile in the community. So many small groups are starting this week, and so if you haven't determined which small group you're going to be involved with, I ask you to get the Church Center app and log on, make the Park Church your home church, and you can browse open groups and registrations as well for future events. Or don't forget, you can always pick up a connection guide at the Welcome Center on Sunday or at the connection table, the orange table that Pastor Shea stands at every week. This coming Sunday at 6 p.m. is our first prayer summit of the fall. It's 1 hour of dedicated prayer and worship, just to seeking God together. And childcare is provided, so parents, we can get you out, take care of your kids. They'll be blessed while you pray, and then we'll get you home in time for bedtime. Also, we're thankful that our answer to prayer for a facilities coordinator, we've hired somebody, and so you'll see Nate around the building working on and setting up many things, and so we know you're going to welcome him with open arms, Park Church, and there's great things again in store. So that's all for me this evening. Have a great night. Hope to see you on Sunday.